Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mijo podcast. Today I am joined by a very special guest who is also our first ever guest on the Mijo podcast. Jasmine, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Hi, Axel. Thank you for having me.
So I really wanted to have you on the podcast, honestly, from like the initial start of us even putting this podcast together, because our podcast is very much focused on first gen stories and really just like community and culture. And I remember, how we met, and we'll get into that a little bit right now, but we really connected over that where, we were in a space where we were singled out, I guess you can kind of say, but we came together to share similar stories, similar messages, and we connected over that. And we really we followed each other on Instagram, and some time has passed since then, but we've, kept up with each other via social media. And you've gone on to do amazing things with your career. So I was like, I really want to get Jasmine on. I think she'll have some powerful wisdom to share with our audience. And I was like, it's just like one of the perfect people that I could ever dream of having on the podcast. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Powerful wisdom. Okay. Yeah, that was very sweet.
Not to scare you off. But yeah, so before we dive into really poetry and that whole journey for you, I really want to talk about just your first gen experience and really how that kind of interplays with your, career. And we'll see that down the line once we dive into that. But tell us a little bit about your upbringing as a first-gen daughter, how that connection with your parents and with the community that you grew up in, and really just how all of that, came to form the person that you are today, and how that reflects in the work that you do.
Yeah, there's so much to it, but I guess the gist of the background is I'm first-generation Guatemalan American. Both of my parents are from San Marcos, Guatemala, and I was born and raised in LA between South Central and the San Fernando Valley. The first half of my adolescence really being spent in the very heavily Latino community of South Central that I was in. It's also a very Black and brown community, but in the spaces that I frequented and in the schools that I grew up in, there were mostly other Hispanic and Latino kids around me, to the point where I often felt like even I was a sliver of diversity being Guatemalan, whereas most of my peers were Mexican. And even in religion, most of my peers being Catholic, and then my family being Christian. It was the funny thing that I singled out until being in high school, where I went to a really large high school with a lot more diversity, and seeing these different pockets of communities of color, and finally not only seeing Latinidad reflected back to me was a really eye-opening experience. And also because a lot of these other kids were first gen, but I immediately gravitated toward the similarities of the shared experience in that. A lot of my friends who would invite me over to their homes, meeting their parents, and even if obviously the languages that we speak weren't the same, greeting their families in the same way that I would see my friends greet my parents, and in the broken English that they had, saying hello and welcoming them into our home, and then me being welcomed into the homes of my friends' families. It was, it's just such a beautiful experience, because we're both in an environment where we are surrounded by a lot of kids and a lot of people who share the experience. But then also when we're in spaces like the ones that we met at, where we feel like we are representing, our communities and our culture and our age group, there's a pride that really is just inherently sewn into that. And being first gen, being a daughter of immigrants, I feel immensely tied to my culture, even though I've never seen I haven't seen Guatemala yet. I haven't been. I'm hoping to go at the end of this year for the first time, but I am just so immensely proud of where I come from, where they come from, and that really has been sewn into the work that I've done in poetry and writing, and yeah, it informs everything of who I am, and it's been a beautiful upbringing. So I'm so happy with my family. I love them so much, you know.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's beautiful. And I think it's so funny how you said like you're so proud of a culture that you still haven't seen. I can relate to that too because my mom's from Sinaloa and my dad's from Guerrero and I haven't been to any. But I'm so proud of my culture. And my parents tell me this all the time. They're like, it's so like funny in a way to see how you pride yourself of this culture and you do a lot of work that ties in our culture, but yet you haven't been to that place. And I think a lot of that is, kind of like that almond to like how we're raised and how our parents really just like made sure to like keep the traditions alive and to like
Yeah.
carry that over to us, that like we feel that connection without having to physically have been in that place or like have grown up in that place. I too like I really like want to get out there and like soon and really just explore and kind of like see where my parents grew up. But I think that's like so unique. And another thing that like sparked a little comment in my mind was kind of like how you mentioned being like a sliver of diversity in like a Latino community. And I think that's something that's not very often talked about. And we like briefly talked about this before we started filming, but a lot of times people think like Latinos is just like one big like that's it, like you're Latino and that's it.
Yeah.
But like once you dive in, it's like you have like people from Guatemala, you have people from Mexico, you have people from El Salvador. And I think sometimes like people like especially outsiders looking in, they really forget that. Or like they'll default to Mexican. Like they think everything's Mexican. Like, oh, that's Mexican food. And they're like,
Right.
no, like that's a pupusa. That's not a Mexican dish. So I think that's like something that, is kind of like funny because not that it's funny, but it's something that like is not so commonly talked about.
Yeah. I catch myself even making that mistake myself. But I met somebody last night who is from Paraguay, and when we were talking about where he's from, he was like showing me dishes from his country, and talking about how he really has like no community in LA because if there are other folks from Paraguay, like the only places that he's really found them are in like New York or in other cities and not really in LA. But I feel like regardless of that, that's why just kind of grouping Latinos together, that's why we have such a strong sense of community. But then remembering that there are very specific experiences and different pockets of culture, like you said, like every country is its own world, is its own cuisine, its own language, its own everything. Doing the unlearning and like the distinguishing of like, no, these countries have different traits, different cuisines, like even within countries, like North India and South India being very different. So it's just, I think it was something that was very influenced by our education system and the very easy jump to just labeling things and labeling people, but then meeting people and like being in spaces with them where they're sharing to you about where they come from and what their customs are, and that's been really lovely, which is why it was so important to get out of the bubble of only Latinos in South Central for me. Like the culture shock that I got in the first week of high school, like was insane. But it was one of the greatest gifts that I could have gotten at that very, very pivotal age. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that, by the way. So poetry is honestly like amazing in itself, but poetry is very unique to you. And I know that's one of the things that you have pursued. And first of all, it's one of the things that I'm fascinated by. And we met, the first time we ever met was at this like fundraiser / like awareness event for the nonprofits that we worked for. And, she was able to share one of her pieces there, which is like probably one of my favorite pieces of yours. It's like so beautiful. And I remember like, this was at the beginning, like we still hadn't like introduced like each other, haven't met each other. And, she went up, she did her poem and she's, reading her poem, and halfway through the poem, you start talking about culture and language, and you start talking about all these amazing things that I instantly like gravitated to and like connected with. And then that's when I was like, oh my God, like I'm not the only one in this space, right? Like I'm not the only Latino in this space. And after we were able to chat a little bit, because then after I went and then I kind of did my spiel, which was very similar, really touching about like our communities, especially like our communities back home. And for me, it was like the high school that I was working at the time. So I think that was like really like awesome, kind of like how we were able to find ourselves in that space. And I think that's really what like led to us like being like, oh my God, like, yeah, we get each other, and like we followed each other. And I think my favorite line is like in that speech is when you talk about like the hot Cheeto girl. That's like my favorite of it all. But like having heard that speech, I kind of want to talk a little bit about how your culture and how your first gen experience really ties into the work that you do in poetry.
Yeah, it's all of my writing is about growing up around the community, around Latinidad, around being a Latina. I talk about it like I'm not, but it sometimes even felt like I was peering in on like the stereotype of like what a Latina girl is, because I wasn't like the branded type that I talk about in the Hot Cheeto Girl poem, like loud, very big, like not afraid to speak her mind, and to like say the controversial thing, or to take up space and to gather attention to herself. The whole poem is about my judgment of that when I was younger, because I grew up as more of a quiet girl. And even when I would call myself quiet, I would say it as a negative thing, like something that needed to be changed. And so, of course, like when you're growing up too, like everything feels big and everything feels grand. And I think I had so much I wanted to say all the time, but not finding the way to say it made me look at the girls that could, and made me, like look down on them a little bit. And I say that now fully knowing like that was so silly, but I know that it's like the experience of so many, not only girls, but just like we do that as people, as like human beings that aren't really sure of ourselves in one type of way. And so when we see people who are, it's like either side eye or like, I wish I could do that. I wish I could be that. But I think those girls were my first lesson in like not giving a fuck, and like, just being like yourself. And even then, like, I know these girls are also, it's like the first to go home and say the mean things in the mirror. And like the self-love thing is just so cyclical. So when I first started getting into poetry, I just knew that everything I write is for these girls, and for me, and for like the little girl who wasn't really sure of how to say the thing that she wanted to say, and who's like always in a sweater. I don't know, like, who's like walking home and like her bangs are in the way. I don't know. I didn't have bangs, but yeah, there's just something so sweet about going around to high schools, because I would perform this poem like at different schools around LA County, and there was always just a group of girls huddled together, giggling and whispering to each other. And I would like see like the different pockets of like, oh, these are, I know what you are. And then, the girls who have their makeup done and who are like, very, yes. And like they're in a group and they're whispering to each other. And it's just like this was like my stage, and like this was me. And so when I'm sharing this poem, it's like it's y'all who I'm talking to. And even to the boy next to him who's like not really paying attention, like has an AirPod in and is dozing off, like I'm also talking to you, homie. Like low-key in that poem I kind of diss boys like this, but But even them, like everything at that age is so tender. And I just remember feeling like so many big things. And so when I got into poetry, I was like 17 going into community college, and I was finally able to say the things that I wanted to say about those times and those eras. But that is really what informs that writing.
So I know you talked a little bit about kind of like discovering poetry, and I want to dive into that because I think it's so unique for, poetry to be an art that you want to pick up. Not saying that it's like, nothing against that, but I really feel like a lot of times our communities might have a hard time like understanding, these creative avenues that we take. I see it a lot with some of the creative projects that I do, where like my family may not understand it, and I kind of break it down and show them that, it's something that I'm passionate about. So what was that experience for you, really like discovering poetry and then saying like, hey, this is something that I wanted to like pick up, and I want to write my own poetry, share my own messages?
I found it around the tail end of high school, so 16, 17. And like many of my peers who I've met in the scene, we really went down a YouTube rabbit hole of spoken word. There are a lot of big channels that were especially like at their peak, let's say like really popular like 10, 20 years ago, because I imagine when things like YouTube and videos are kind of being introduced on the internet, the very simple performance aspect of spoken word. I mean, it's just your body, the language, and there's no extra glitz and glamour to it. So the spoken word videos that were gaining millions of views at the time are some of the most evocative, beautifully powerful pieces that say the big thing in simple ways, or just use language as a tool to carry that message in a very impactful and resonating way. I think the first poems that I gravitated towards were about relationships, about the relationship with your body. There were a lot of poets that I saw on YouTube for the first time, and then would later meet them in the spaces that I started going to and that I became a part of as well. And one of those was the Poetry Lounge, DPL. They have been a long-standing weekly open mic here in LA for 27 years now, and they started out in a living room, in the living room of one of their co-founders, Dante Bosco, and now they have been in many theaters throughout the years. During the pandemic, they moved to an online setting like everything else did, but the community that has like persisted through this, the people that have been raised in these spaces, I really gravitated towards all of that because it was, I guess, the simplest way to say the thing that I wanted to share. In these spaces, people are open to being vulnerable. We hold each other to it, and it was really one of the most like transformative spaces to be in as an 18-year-old who is like starting college, and typically like, you know, who goes to open mics for fun? But like, like they're so much fun. The open mics that my friends would put on in coffee shops, just like, in the back room of restaurants. Like, these were the spaces where I first started making friends in the poetry scene, and where I got to meet the people who you got to make a career out of it. And I'm still like in between. Because I don't think I'm gonna be like a poet as like my 9 to 5. Like, that's not what my taxes are gonna say. But it's just such a beautiful art form, and also it's free, and I love that because so many things, you gotta invest to get good at them. I'm taking a film photography class right now, and that expensive,
Yep.
very expensive. But I love poetry. I was like, yeah, this is just me, my thoughts, like a notebook and a pen, and it's just the practice of yourself and getting very comfortable with yourself on stage or just in a mic or on a mic around others, like it's a very transformative space. So I try to bring a lot of friends to open mics, and then if they love it, they love it, and if it's not for them, it's not for them. But it's one of those like arts that maybe isn't really immediately thought about when we're thinking about creative outlets, like different mediums and like drawing and dancing is a really big one. I have a lot of friends who love dancing, and that space is a little intimidating to me. Like, I love dancing. I would love to go to a dance class, but right now I feel like I have to build up the courage to even sign up for it, you know? Mm-hmm. So we have different comfort zones, and I think the open mic space and the spoken word space has become one of mine, even though still, like, every time my name gets called and I'm on my way to go up, like, my heart starts beating a little bit. But when I was younger, I remember that feeling as a feeling of like nerves, and then you would feel like your heartbeat in your throat and everything, like before you would go up to do a presentation. Mm-hmm. And that never stops happening. But now, instead of it terrifying me, it's the message that I'm excited for what I'm about to share, and it's important to me, and I care. So yeah, that's the big reason why I gravitated toward it so much.
Yeah. And I think also like what's unique to our culture is like a lot of our cultures are really big with like stories and messages, and like we have so much to share. And I think that comes across in a lot of different mediums, and in your medium, you know, it comes across in your poetry where you're able to share that culture, those experiences, those feelings, the stories, you know. And I'm sure other people share stories of, you know, traditions that their families have passed on. And I think that's really beautiful. And, you know, the reason why I asked that question was because, like, for me growing up, I was really big into dance. And, like, I was in dance in school, and I was, you know, doing the community dance, like, at the rec center. And that was something that was in a way like a culture shock to my parents, because especially in my family, like it was very big soccer centered. So like soccer, like you were just automatically like enrolled in soccer, like in my family. And that's like such a Mexican thing to do. So when I really didn't show interest in that, my parents were kind of like, they had that disconnect with like understanding like a different form of, you know, recreational like outlet, especially something so, you know, unique like dance, and, you know, the creativity and the art that's behind that. So I think it was an experience. It was definitely something where I kind of like told my parents like, hey, I want to do dance. And it was like, why do you want to do dance? You know, like, don't you have fun like playing soccer? But yeah, like that, I honestly, like, I understand like what you mean. And I think something that I'm also interested in is like seeing if there was a process of you going from like writing privately to like publicly, how you do it now. Because I can only imagine, like, you know, as you're testing the waters and you're writing, you're creating, like maybe there's that process of like saying, hey, like I'm ready to do this open mic that you mentioned. So how's that? Like, how does that work out? That's like something I'm interested in.
There weren't very many poems that I was writing only for myself before I started sharing them, primarily because the first poems that I was writing were for a slam already. I think it mostly came about because I just really wanted to be a theater kid in high school, but my schedule didn't permit for that. It was, you know, full of like other classes, like just for academics. And so I didn't have as much time for the extracurriculars that I really wanted to fit in there. But in high school, I had the opportunity to be a part of the poetry slam team, which is a very niche thing, but this slam team was coached by the teacher that would later be my 12th grade AP English Lit teacher. And I remember hearing about them in my freshman year when I first joined, and I really wanted to audition for that team. And sophomore year came and the pandemic came, and so I didn't get the opportunity until my senior year. But when I did get the opportunity to join the team, the first poems that I wrote were in preparation for the big competition. If you don't know what a slam is, it's basically spoken word poems that will then get points attributed to them. So out of 10, There's a winner. There are second place, third place. We ended up taking third place at that slam, but it was a slam for high school students across Southern California, and primarily ones here in LA, but spearheaded by the organization that I would then join post high school. And it was a very just like go into the deep end introduction into the world of slam poetry and performing poems for the stage. And so when I first started writing, really like they were very personal to me, but I was writing with the intention of these being seen and being performed. And the poems that would later be written only for me, it was very interesting to like turn that first introduction to poetry on its head and now have poems that are just for me or like just for my eyes. So I guess it's a little less traditional because it's usually the other way around. A lot of my friends who are poets have been writing since they were small in middle school, since they, could begin writing. But I think the things that I wrote when I was younger were short stories or like nothing crazy. I think it was always just like essays because all the writing that I did was like for school. So I didn't really like keep it from myself until I started journaling in high school as well. But even then their journals and the diary entries were very like not formal, and they never had structure. I would always be like, "Dear diary, today is June 18th, 2024, and it is Wednesday, and da-da-da-da-da." Definitely not Wednesday on June 18th, 2024, but like just something very, very, very formal. And so poetry was a step away from that formality, and then finally breaking form and making it more personal to me, which was very, very lovely to step into in my late teens.
That's awesome. I honestly, I asked the question because, and now I'm realizing that it's really a unique experience for every like individual. But I personally just thought like, and I've heard of poems before, and different artists, and I've always wondered like, oh my God, like there had to have been like that, that period where they wrote for themselves. But I think it's interesting to hear how kind of you mentioned it was a little bit backwards for you. Your first poem was for a slam, which I think like hats off to you because that's like huge. And
I mean, it was really bad though, but yeah.
Hey, but I feel like, the first time we all do something, it's
course,
like pretty much like, there's a lot of growing pains that can happen from that. So
absolutely.
like, I just honestly like the courage it took for you to like decide my first poem is going to be something I'm going to like compete with. Props to you. But I'm interested to also know like, what did your family think about all of this? Because I know like poetry isn't such a traditional like avenue or like outlook for most, Latinos. So I'm interested to know like, what did your parents think about like you coming to them and saying like, hey, mom, dad, like I want to write poetry?
Yeah, I had to look up the translations for poesía, declamación. Like every time I'd come home and I'd explain that I was at slam practice after school. We had practice after school every single day, Monday through Friday. So when I was explaining this to them, it was like, okay, like we get it, kind of. But then the competition rolls around and they come and they see the finals and the poems that we had written. I mean, I was 17. This is like peak teenager, but everything is like a big deal and everything is like, all these feelings. The poems that we were writing for this competition were like, let's dig into our trauma and like let's stir that up and then let's talk about it on stage. But one of the poems that we had was about growing up in the church, and it was a group piece. So it was me and then one of my teammates, and the way that slam was structured is you have a classic poem and then you have a response poem to it. So your classic is not written by you, but it's from another poet that you then memorize, and then you write a response poem to this classic. and there just has to be like a through line of theme, or maybe you take some lines that you really loved from the classic poem and you're repeating them in your response. But there's like a conversation between the two pieces that's happening. And the classic that we had chosen was titled I Used to Pray, and beautiful piece. And our response kind of just took that same semblance of the like the pain or some of the imprints that growing up in the church had on us. And it was very raw and it was very real, but we also definitely like dug in there with the hurt of it. And you're on stage, like you're making it into like a big thing. And then we had like choreography where we like put our hands together, and like do the and my mom is in the audience, and and she's recording us, and I remember after the whole competition ended, we took third place. It was a happy moment, but even then, I knew like if my parents see this, they're gonna have a completely different perspective of it. Like for us, this is very true to us, but also like it seems like we're calling out the things that we didn't like about growing up in this environment. Yeah. And who put us in this environment? Our
Correct.
Parents. And I guess, that it's a 3-minute piece that you see on stage, and this 3 minutes does not dictate all of my feelings about growing up in church and and having these like values of God placed into my life. Like it's so much more nuanced than that. But in these 3 minutes where we're sharing a very specific section of it, I just knew like that's not going to translate the same to my parents. Yeah. And I did not prep them for that. And so when we left the theater, she was upset, and I so desperately wanted to console her, and I wanted to explain myself, but also like, how do you explain like this is just like me sharing vulnerable art, but also I love you and I love the things that you have instilled in us. Yeah. But also there's a double-edged sword in that, like I can't explain all of that in one evening. But I also, of course, I wanted them to come and see the work that we had been doing, because I knew that it was special to me. I knew that it was important. Of course, I didn't have the hindsight to be like, some of this is a little bit, it seems like a little bit accusatory, but not at all. Even now, though, the relationship between them and the work that I do has changed a lot, because I also don't approach my work anymore with just digging into the wound of the things that I've been through. Mm-hmm. I much rather love to shed light on the joy. I feel like there's so much more. I'm a lot more keen to being vulnerable with joy, and I think spoken word also gets like a strange rep because it's often an outlet for, trauma and sharing the bad things that have happened to us. But some of my favorite and most beloved poems have been ones that change that perspective and look at it through a lens of joy and vulnerability that doesn't just, rely on saying the sad, scary thing. But just says it in a funny way. Says it with kindness and humor. Yeah, like not everything is that deep,
Yeah. So was that kind of like finding like your groove, your voice? Yeah. I think that's true, because a lot of artists, and I think we hear this more like in the musical world, where like people are like, oh, I had to find like my genre, or I had to find like my voice, or like my rhythm. So I feel like in a way that's kind of the equivalent of saying like you had to find like what you felt really defined you as an artist, and what you felt more like, gravitated towards sharing. And I know we talked about this like earlier, and we had mentions of it, and we've had conversations about this on how a lot of your work is influenced by culture and first gen experiences, and how that shows up in your poetry. Like, are there any like themes that really just like are reoccurring for you, or like anything in general regarding to that experience and tying that into your work and having that experience kind of like be part of that positive trait that you realize you're more vulnerable with positivity? So,
oh yeah, girlhood, womanhood, femininity. I mean, all of my early poems are about being a girl and loving being a girl. So many things about my mom and my relationship to my mom, my culture. I'm writing something right now about body hair, I guess, and like the first line is going to be, every 14 days I become Frida. And so, you know, I grew up with a unibrow, and I didn't get it shaved or waxed until I was like 10. And I remember like that moment being very, very big, because I was like a little girl, and I was in a salon, and my mom, I would accompany her to get her eyebrows waxed. And for the very first time, she asked me, "Do you want to get yours waxed?" And I was like, it's time. It's my moment. But yeah, there's just everything for me is personal right now, because also I don't have a lot to say about the big things. I know that there are so many amazing pieces of work that I consume daily that that say the things about world events and, you know, big themes, big topics that I will one day love to write about. But I feel like I can't really get to that until I get to myself. So I'm digging into all of this like as much as I can before I try to tackle, or I do tackle them now, but you know, they're just not. I'm young, dude. Like, you know, we're hella young. Like
100%.
Yeah, there's definitely
the time will come. Like it'll feel right. Yeah.
I feel like this is my time to be selfish. So
yeah, as you should. As you should.
As I should, exactly. but yeah, definitely that. And then the other thing being, I love writing about Spanish. I have a poem called The Letter J in Spanish that I would love to tweak, because being in more communities where I'm surrounded by Latinos that I'm inspired by creatives and professionals, I really want to center that in my work. Like I'm going by Yami now as well, which is a nickname that my parents have always called me. And one of my nicknames with my friends is Jam or Jam Jam. But who's gonna call me Yami when they're no longer here, you know? So I would love to. I'm sprinkling that in there.
I love that.
That's one of them. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I know you talked about like girlhood and kind of like, you know, the different aspects and per se like chapters of this. But what do you say, like, of course you write, you know, for other girls that, you know, could look up to you, but what do you say you kind of also write for people that are outside of that? Like people that may not like understand our culture and understand that like as a way of you kind of saying like, this is who I am and this is how I want to be seen, and, you know, touches into the sprinkle of Yami being thrown in there.
Yes, absolutely. I've found that it's a very universal experience. I know of this experience through the lens of being a Latina, but in the spaces where I've shared that poem and nobody in the room is Hispanic, it almost settles even more. Like the reaction to it is because we as women just feel this. Everything is just like, what is being a girl if not wanting to be loved and to be seen and to be valued? And so one of my favorite poets, like Olivia Gatwood, I feel like I really like draw a lot of that energy from her poems. Like one of her poems is titled, I'm forgetting the title, but she writes a lot about being a teenage girl, and there's a line that she has that's like, my grandmother is a teenage girl. Like when she sends me letters and then I don't reply, and she says, "Why won't you text me back? Why won't you love me?" Like, and there's just a really a universal like thread that I think is felt even in spaces where, there aren't young, shy brown girls, but even in like the one that I performed in that we met at, I posted that video because the audience in that room, I could hear their reactions to it. And there was like a lady at the end that like gasped, and she was like, "Ah," and I was like, "Yeah, like that's what it's about." So if the ladies in Beverly Hills get it, then they get it. And I feel like that's really the beautiful part of spoken word, is just we're sharing the most personal things, but really like usually what's very specific to us is felt to a wider range of people. So yeah, it's about getting as specific as possible, and then whoever resonates with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that's one of the things that I realized, like with the speech that I did for my commencement. You know, I was very scared because it was such a personal message to me. And I think after it had gone viral, and after like people had reached out, and even people that knew me and that were around me, like in my everyday life, when I heard their stories and how they connected to the message I shared, that's when I realized, I was like, it's very unique, but it resonates with a lot of people. And I know you're doing amazing work, and I see it all the time on social media, and I know you've been in so many amazing spaces. And I want to talk about recently the space that you were in, because I don't know much about it, but I saw, what you posted on social media, and I was just like, wowed. I saw the beautiful pictures. It's like you're on this grand stage and you're sharing this amazing poem with like beautiful digitals in the background that are really reflective of like LA and like the culture. And I just think it's great work, and I really like want to applaud you for that, because
Thank
I
you.
feel like it's something that needs to be heard, and I feel like we need to be in these spaces as first gen daughters, sons, students, as Latinos, like whatever it may be. Like it's time for our stories to like really be heard and really be taken seriously. So like that event, like tell us about it. Like what was that?
Yeah, that was a show called If I Awaken in Los Angeles, produced by Get Lit Words Ignite, the nonprofit that I was involved in, and the lovely folks at the Ford also spearheading the whole thing. The Ford is a really wonderful theater, a space that highlights a lot of multicultural productions, and really just is a space where these shows are given the spotlight for the community to come in and enjoy, because it is like a bit of an intimate space, even though it's an outdoor theater. It's like right up against the palm trees, and I've seen a couple shows there myself of bands that I love. So to come back and to perform in that space was very full circle. But the show itself was a love letter, an homage to Los Angeles and the different neighborhoods that the cast grew up in. We had a choir from Leimert Park, who were all in high schoolers, and they were phenomenal. We had dancers who were both from LA and San Diego, and we had different poets and musicians, spoken word artists, and yeah, it was a production that was involving so many people, directed by Gina Belafonte, the music being the Color of Noise Orchestra and Derek Hodge, the whole thing produced by Diane Luby Lane. Like, just a labor of love of all of these people coming together and saying, we want to represent our tapestry of LA. And so I was tapped into write about the Latino diaspora of Los Angeles, which like is so wide. Like even my corners of it are only one, side of it. So to really get all of the faces of it, I made references to East LA and to different parts of the city that even if I don't have a personal connection to, I just know like are such central hub spots of our people. And so yeah, my experiences are reflected in the Valley and in South Central. But I talked about Mariachi Plaza, which in the show, by the way, I call Mariachi Square. And my bad. Like I was just there the other week. I was like, nobody corrected me.
You're like walking up to the sign like, oh.
Yeah. I was like, oh, damn. But like as somebody calls it the square. Maybe, who knows. But I'm also I'm in these spaces a lot more now, like the in East LA in the Boyle Heights community, in Lincoln Heights, in Mid City. I went to kindergarten in Mid City, and now I'm like doing an internship there, and it's just like so nostalgic to be back in like a spot that I remember like being 5 years old in, and now navigating these streets as an adult. But like that's what it was about. It was about sharing our stories as people that have been born or just raised here, or even raised here as adults, like people that move to LA to find themselves in the career that they're chasing and a dream that they are hopeful for. So yeah, just I mean, there are so many productions and pieces of music and pieces of art that call out LA as the beautiful like destination for dreams and for all of these things to unfold. And so to grow up here, we're always aware of that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think coming of age, especially like as a young 20 something year old, like it just becomes even more so special to be folded into that legacy. And so if I Awaken in LA was all of that rolled into one night of music, dance, poetry, some really sick performers, my lovely friends. One of them who's the LA Youth Poet Laureate right now, Samantha Rios. Like she had her beautiful piece, Ariana Lee's beautiful piece, Monique Mitchell, Elise Waters. Oh my God, it's a whole cast, y'all. But the girls, shout out to them because yeah, we had like 2 in-person rehearsals before the show happened on Friday, August 1st. And it just all came beautifully together because we had an amazing director, Gina, who was like, we're delivering a message and do your thing and you're gonna do it well. And it was beautiful. Yeah.
Love that. Are there moments where you like step back and you're like, wow, like how far you've gotten, like the spaces that you're in? And I think like, of course, like the Fourth Theater is like amazing, but even just like you mentioning, like going back to like being in Mid City, like you're now revisiting these spaces, a whole completely different person with different experiences, with a whole different like mission in mind. Like, how does that feel to like take a step back and say like, oh my God, I can't believe like I've gotten this far, that I'm here like in this space, and like the honor and the pride that it takes to be in those spaces, because that's like amazing.
Yes, I love it. I love that this is how my early 20s are unfolding. Because when I was graduating high school, I was going to go off to college in Northern California, and then I withdrew my enrollment because I thought I need more time here, and I have so many things I want to figure out. And so I enrolled in community college, and that really allowed me to step back and think about what it is that I really wanted to do, because I didn't want to go to a 4-year institution to spend thousands of dollars and not feel like I was making the most of that experience. I knew that I still struggled with academics at that time.
Yeah.
And I had so much more that I wanted to figure out for myself. So being in CC like really allowed me to explore more poetry here in LA and be more involved in the community. And so now to be an adult in the spaces that I grew up in, it's so beautiful. And now I understand why adults are always talking about like, dude, my parents will like talk about Guatemala and like name specific streets and specific people, and like y'all haven't been there in over 20 years and you remember this like you were there yesterday. And I'm more and more understanding it now, because I'll be in these like different neighborhoods and I'm just like, yeah, the Metro PCSO was right there, like, it's just everything is a journal of time, and we just are so tied to the things that made us who we are, and to our memories of childhood, and so to grow up in the city that raised me and then see like the different facets of it, like it's just so lovely. I feel very happy and very blessed because I know that this is the manifestation of my parents' sacrifice and their hard work. And it means so much to me that I'm able to represent them and to just vibe and have fun. I'm having a great time. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
are, and I love that for you, and I think it's true. You know, a lot of times, like, you know, we look back and we kind of see like where we're at in life, and we're very proud of it, but we're very like, you know, grateful for it, and I think it really ties back to saying like truly is like the sacrifice of our parents. And I think we're getting to live like our parents' wildest dreams because I'm sure our parents had like their own niche, you know, like topics that they were wishing to pursue back home and they couldn't, right? Because they had to work to contribute to the family. So like in a way, like we're pursuing like niche, you know, avenues, but it kind of makes them happy and it makes them proud that we get to have that opportunity to go off and do all these amazing things that they didn't even know like existed or that they didn't even know like were possible for people like us or for like, you know, the places that we live in. And I think another telling thing is like for Christian, you know, individuals, like a lot of the times there isn't a roadmap. There isn't someone to guide you and say like, okay, this is what you need to do and you're going to apply here. And, you know, we're going to have you like go to this specific like open mic night. So like, what was that experience for you? Kind of like navigating it all on your own and really just kind of making that network and building those connections that were eventually going to help you kind of like, you know, lead yourself to like, oh, we're going to go to this open mic night and introducing yourself to all these organizations. Because I think that's one of the biggest things that I struggled with was like not having that clear roadmap and always having to kind of like figure it out as I'm trying to get to where I'm trying to go. So it's like, not only do I have this passion I want to pursue, but now I have to like figure out how to get there.
Yeah. I think this experience really makes you realize how important it is to rely on the people and peers in your community rather than just the upbringing and the lessons from family, because I completely understand what you mean. Like my dad and my mom don't understand slam, you know, and they don't know the open mic scene. Every time I would tell them like every Tuesday I'm going to Fairfax, and he's just like, all right, cool. And what I really learned was like I am going to be supported and I'm gonna get better by surrounding myself with people who know what they're doing and who have been through the same thing of like not exactly knowing how to carve out your own space, but just kind of like figuring it out as you go. So for me, my brother helped a lot as well. Having an older brother really helped me navigate college and or actually he was the one that was like, hey, go to the 4-year, don't go to community. And I was like, no. So even that, like I had to deviate from some of the advice that they were giving me because I knew that isn't right for me. And I think that this is, so I'm going to try this. And it worked out. I think in the spaces where I am trying to grow in and they're not familiar with, that's where I really depend on the people who are in those spaces, like the poets that have been doing it for a lot longer than I have. The people who are like older and have been in the community for a while and who are able to give advice. Like everything is just about reaching out and making yourself available to others as well, because now I'm the person that's like giving advice to younger college students and about the transfer process, about how to cold email and like reach out and just like put yourself out there to say yes to anything that comes your way. But yeah, otherwise I wouldn't be able to get any of it done. But yeah, I think the way that first gen students, or see even me automatically saying students, but the way that first gen kids like really feel connected is by connecting to other first gen kids that have gone through it and through the people that we're trying to ultimately see ourselves in. So even if that dream doesn't always mirror what our parents thought that what they wanted for us, it's us just like carving our own path and saying like, I got this, believe in me, and I'll make you proud, I guess. That was so corny, but I meant it. I meant it.
What advice would you give to someone listening at home that wants to follow like a non-traditional path? Like, you know, I'm sure a lot of people are probably looking at this and probably wondering like, hey, like I can relate, and it might not be poetry, it might not be, you know, what I'm doing, but it might be something unique to them. Like what's that advice that you think you could give?
On the real, get attached to a nonprofit that is in the space of your interest. There are so many programs and different organizations that have entire missions around uplifting youth that want to do the arts or do STEM or do things that are usually not accessible to kids that grow up in schools that don't have those resources. Like I went to Title I schools all my life, but even in those Title I schools, there were programs that were geared for us to like be very specialized in like a certain, like in the humanities or in STEM. I took like a STEM program in like 5th grade, and I remember thinking like, wow, we're making robots, like this is cool. But it's really just like if you have something that you really want to do, like there is already a place out there that's like building the foundation, because it's really, really hard to like just do that on your own. Like you don't even know where to go. Yeah. So yeah, getting involved in spaces that are already offering those resources is the greatest thing. And then showing up and saying yes to getting further involved, which is hard for, you know, like a little shy girl who doesn't know how to fully have a conversation with somebody yet. But like you're building that muscle and you're growing into it. And if something excites you, you just got to go for it. Like you have to let your heart like keep beating, but you know, you're keeping your cool or trying to, and then going forward and putting everything you can into it. But yeah, just you're also going to be driving a lot. Because it's a lot of driving, and here in LA at least. I don't know where you are, but yeah, just always like put yourself in those spaces, because it takes effort, but it's so worth it. So the entire world is going to tell you don't be shy, but like you can be shy, but just do it, just show up, and that's my advice. Yeah, the non-traditional path, just especially in the arts, it involves surrounding yourself in community and finding the spaces that are already doing the things that you want to do, and learning from the people that have been doing them for years, and you know, just soaking up all of that good art and that good info. I love poets, and I'm always around them. So yeah.
I think that's so true. I always tell people like I it's funny because you mentioned like the nonprofit thing, and I always tell people that because that's honestly how I got my start in the career that I have. And it's not also so much about like what you're currently doing, it's about where you want to go, because there's definitely like internships that I had at some point where it wasn't something that I was like very fond on, but it was something where I'm like, okay, I'm in the space, I'm gonna meet people, right? Like there's been places, literally there's been opportunities where it's like I'm like serving coffee and like checking people in. Like I volunteered for like different like events where it's like I'm checking people in, but it's like, to me, it's like I'm in the space and like I'm going to get to meet people, right? So then it's like after volunteering like 2 times and having conversations with like the coordinators, and then they're like, oh, wait, you're interested in this? Like I can hook you up and I can like introduce you to this person. And I think that's kind of like the connection that's going to really help people. Because it fluctuates, right? And there is definitely opportunities that I've had where it's like very like centered, and it's like, we're going to help you get to where you want to go if that's your passion. Like that's our mission. But I really do feel like just the nonprofit scene is like really slept on, and they're always eager to have like volunteers and program participants, and hey, sometimes they might even give you a job.
Yeah, they can give you jobs. But yeah, that's really the key thing, because what I realize is as with more affluent communities, or you know, communities that are established and getting their kids in programs and summer camps and putting them in like 5 different extracurriculars, is like that's what they're doing. They're just community building. They are families that know somebody. And so, like, networking is a word that's like thrown around so much and really like dug into the grave, but like it really is like the gist of it is like you're just meeting people and getting connected to people who will then put you in a position that otherwise you would never find yourself in. So the whole gist of it is we're often not given these opportunities because of the situation that we came into this world with. But, this doesn't make us any less capable. If anything, it gives us the perspective of, well, I came with the resources that, or I came with like not as much knowledge, but I have this completely different and special worldview that will bring something to the table. Yeah, just meet people. That's the gist of it. I feel like I'm saying it in like very professional words and I'm getting a little, but meet people. Axel was lovely. I just met this dude at an event and I was like, yeah, like give me your
And
Instagram.
she's sitting on my couch
Yeah,
doing this podcast.
That was years ago, by the way. Yeah, I was like 18 or 19 when that happened. Yeah. And now you've graduated college, dude.
Yes.
Yeah. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. It's been years, you guys. So that's why like it was such a full circle moment, because when I thought of the podcast, I was like, I want to have Jasmine on. And,
sweet.
I followed along, I still follow you on Instagram and we met one time for like coffee and we kind of like caught up and everything. And, it's really just like building even connections like this, right? Where it's like I was in that space and I met her through one of those like nonprofit opportunities. And we would have never met if it wasn't for that opportunity in that space. And this is how you also start to like meet peers that are your same age and that have, a creative outlook. Like, I'm not doing work in the poetry, industry, but now I know someone that is, right? So it's like really cool to like have that networking. And it's very cliche because I feel like now, especially with like how big everyone is on LinkedIn and like TikTok videos, like everyone wants to throw around networking. But I think it's really important to like really just like build your portfolio of friends and mentors and like peers and people that you could reach out to. Like you might not like have a need for, connecting at some point, but down the line, it's like, hey, like, I need so-and-so. And then you're just like, I know someone, right? So it's like, I think it's really cool for that. So I think that's really exciting. But yeah, what are some like upcoming projects that you have that you're working on?
Yeah, so
a little sneak peek for us.
I briefly mentioned this, but I'm doing an internship right now with an organization called Mid-City Mercado. They are working on launching as a nonprofit, and at the end of this month, they're going to be hosting a gala where we are having like our first opening day for an exhibition titled Legacy. We are highlighting different family-owned businesses in the neighborhoods of Mid-City and West Adams that have been there for years, and especially highlighting their stories because West Adams is a neighborhood that has recently been faced by more gentrification. So I feel like as our neighborhoods change, as our cities, the look of the streets that we grew up on, like, they're not always going to stay the same, but just holding this moment in time of what they were like when we were here and when we were present in them, and the fact that we still are, like, even though things may change, like the legacy of what these places mean to us is ever so important. So that exhibition will be free and open to the public on September 20th. And I'm very excited because we're doing some writing. We've interviewed the families of these businesses. We're making a zine out of it. So that'll be September 20th. I am working on some poems here and there, hoping to be on more slam stages soon and next year. And then, I also I'm having like a fall of fun and good times before I go back to school in the spring. But yeah, it's here and there. I'm around. You'll maybe see me. I'm at parks a lot, so I like to just sit underneath the trees and soak up the sun.
Hey,
yeah.
Always need to touch grass at some point, right?
Touch grass, please.
Please touch grass. Where can people find you and your work and kind of like catch up with you in case they want to like learn more about your journey and just follow along?
Yeah, my Instagram is at Jasmine Minchez. I have a blog as well, Yellowfish Eye, where I post some of my poems. I will be having a website soon, but I don't know, just say hi if you want to. I'm always open for questions. I know a lot about transferring from community college, so I would love to help anybody with that if they ever need that. Even if it's years from now, like just hit me up. I will give advice for free on transferring, and yeah, otherwise just find me in happiness, I guess. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast episode. I think it was such a amazing conversation, and I like love everything that you're doing and everything that you stand for. And I think that's why I've always like kept you in the back of my mind for projects. So thank you so much for coming and for sharing that with our amazing audience. And yeah,
Sweet.
that's it.
Thank you, Axel. Thank y'all.
Bye, everyone.